So we had a question that I think we're going, it was more of a request, and I think Miguel is helping us do this. It's to, since we have this super handy dandy poll thing that we can do, it was a request to see how many people are trying to emulate the rehearsal process or as a goal or an outcome for online choir, or how many people are doing other aspects like strategic listening, and then possibly, I think, hopefully Miguel got my message to see if we can get a poll to as a hybrid learning. So look out for that poll as it comes up. This is just a small question that I don't know if anybody can answer. The question was about the free app Band Lab as a cross-platform in smartphones, trying to layer sound projects. Has anybody tried that before?
I've never heard of that one, but there's so many apps out there we can't keep track of all of them.
Also, we talked about, since you brought up so many apps, the possibility of asking students to download multiple apps. Do we feel that this is difficult for them? If it's not difficult for them because Generation Z knows what they're doing, what are you all doing as far as multiple apps, multiple platforms, or just singular platforms? Because I do see on the chat that some people are doing multiple platforms. Any advice there from anybody?
As much as I feel like students are very proficient in apps, I found my students very nervous about the whole, which app am I supposed to use? And can you be flexible with that because I'm not comfortable with the new one? That caught me by surprise a little bit. I'm focusing on what we're familiar with and comfortable with. We were already using Canvas and YouTube. We added Zoom. I felt like for my particular strategy, that is working well. Although I'm very interested in the virtual choir and any apps that could help with that aspect of it. So I would solicit your help, all of you out there, with that. What is the most simple and efficient way to make that work?
Let's move on to our next topic. I feel like we already did talk about it a whole bunch, which was the virtual choir, but let's maybe perhaps talk about community. We are going to be doing a little bit, we're doing a panel specifically on togetherness and perhaps the unsyllabified information perhaps of being in choir, because choir is inherently a community. That's a webinar that is going to be on Friday with Miguel Felipe as the moderator, and I'll be on the panel, so come watch. But I know, Jill, you wanted to just speak briefly about this because we don't want to step on that webinar's toes, but Jill?
Right. So yeah, thank you. That's an aspect that I think, we can all relate to as choral directors, the sense of community and how important it is for us not to lose that with our students and for ourselves. And for our future ensembles. I keep thinking about the fact that if we let things drop, that's a real recruitment issue. And so how important it is to continue that connection with our students, both for them, for us, for our programs, kind of every aspect. A kind of fun thing that my section leaders mentioned was when we meet together in our virtual Zoom meetings, maybe have a day that we are the flannel shirt choir and everybody wears a flannel shirt. Or we are the jammy choir and everybody wears their jammies. It sounds like a silly thing, but they mentioned those things to develop a sense of community where we could just, if we're kind of stuck in this situation, let's find a way to have fun with it and be able to smile and laugh and communicate while we are still working on our music.
Yeah, if I could piggyback on that. I mean, it's easy to get wrapped up into our daily routines that have all been upended. And we actually had a week of spring break so this is our first week back. So it became real kind of yesterday, maybe Sunday, where all the policies that have been put in place and all the cancellations just kind of really became real. And I had a student send me an email that I saw just before we got on that really reminded me how connected students feel in our ensembles. I don't think we're special. We're not any different than any other professor. We still have to turn in grades. We still have to plan. We still have to prepare. We're not special in that respect, but we do get to see students over the course of many, many years. And this is my 4th year at Rutgers. So this was my first group of students that I would have seen through. And it was such a sad way to end the year with them, to not have that sense of closure, because when we came back from Eastern ACDA, that was it. We didn't know that'd be the last time we would ever meet. So that I'm reminded recently how important that sense of connection is and community is within an ensemble.
And Marie, if it's okay for me to add on a little bit here, one of my students just posted on the chat about that we do quartets, and I'm sure lots of people do that. One of my students, and again, I'm throwing this out, I don't know enough about it, so please, as Stephen suggested, research any software, but one of my students wrote to me and said they're using a platform called Acapella, which only can handle small numbers of students. It's not a virtual choir solution at all. It's just really for small groups. But it might be a way, and one of the things I'm considering is just letting small groups of students, like 4 to 6, find their own time to Zoom together and just create little recordings, even if they're not perfect, but just for them to sit there and sing through a Renaissance motet together. Kyle Nielsen is a former student here, and he's a part of one of the pro choirs, maybe Santa Fe Desert Chorale, and they were talking about just getting together to sing barbershop tags, you know, just making music together with people. And I think that's a way I'm trying to learn the best technological way to make it easy for the students, but some of them are already doing it. Like we have an Acapella group here who is using the Acapella software to make tracks and to write together, and they're already doing it. So I do think that's an option, and I think it's a really great way to maybe engage them, but it needs to be fairly small, I think. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Yeah, the Acapella app is a smaller app, a couple of tracks. And the only way that you can make it work remotely like that is if person A records a track, exports that track, and then sends it to person B, and then person B then dubs it over A up until the point that they think it sounds good. And then they can export that into another track, and then they can send that to person C down the line. There isn't any one app, even Acapella, where they can all do it together at the same time in different places. They have to do it one at a time and then whisper it down the lane to each of the other people. And for a group of 4 to 8, as long as you're not looking for any type of hi-fi sound quality, Acapella is a really great way to get that out for a quartet or similar size.
I think it's really important that that you said that, and that I think there's a lot of people who are asking how to emulate the rehearsal process, because I think people are looking for an app or a way in technology that I just don't think we have in 2020 quite yet, but maybe in the future, where we can rehearse all together. Walton Music put out a really, really funny YouTube video where they tried to do Hallelujah Chorus and just try to rehearse by having someone conduct. And with the issue of latency, it just wasn't possible. And I know that, Stephen, you talked a little bit about ISPs and why that can't work. Could you just speak very briefly about that? And then I just want to remind everybody, sorry, before you do, hold that thought, that the poll came out. And then I did have a question about what the overall results were for the expectation poll. And I just have it here, is that 55 people were expected, 55% of our 130 some attendees were expected to continue choir online. 34% not expected to continue, but I'm still engaging, and 11% was considered a wash, not expected to continue, and so they've adjourned. But could you talk about ISPs and that possibility of latency, Stephen?
Right. So when you're dealing, if you want everybody to be together in an online room, the only way that could conceivably work is if everybody was on the same network. So if everybody was on the University of Arkansas campus network in 8 different rooms, that would be close. It still wouldn't be great. The second that you get somebody on another network, you're dealing with ISP routing that you can't control. For example, my home Wi-Fi here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, if I go to speedtest.net and I run the speed test, it pings through Tulsa, Oklahoma, because that's the nearest major hub router, right? And so somebody who lives in another portion of Northwest Arkansas that's not Fayetteville, maybe Springdale or Bentonville, Arkansas, they run that same speed test and it pings up to Kansas City, or it pings down to Little Rock, or some other portion, right? And because we're all on different networks, we all access our internet through different providers, through Comcast, through AT&T. I use Ozarks Go, which is a local company. We can't control where that signal goes once it leaves our house and then comes back to our house. And you'd be surprised how far some of those signals go. And that just creates a scenario where it's just impossible right now to have multiple people, even two people, in a real-time scenario where a gesture could come down and the other person could respond to it in real time, let alone more than 2 or 3 or 4 people. That would be absolutely impossible. And if you're curious about this, the easiest way to test it is just on your whatever network you're on, go to speedtest.net and then click test, right? It's a one click and it'll show you where is the nearest major router to you, and you'd be surprised at how far your signal's going before it gets to a collection grid.
If I might add, and I think that this would be the one thing that I'll add about what I'm doing personally, knowing that issue of latency and also the sense of the issue of speech codecs on many platforms. I did a test run with the use of original sound on Zoom along with an accompanist. So I had an accompanist in a room with me, use original sound, and if you have questions about speech codecs and original sound, I can kind of answer, because again, I'm not claiming to be tech savvy, but with using the original sound capability that Zoom has, you can hear full long tones. So I'm preparing Carmina, so I told my choir, we just tried it out, you're gonna watch my gesture, but you're gonna put it on mute, and I'm gonna use original sound. And they were able to rehearse their own part, but not hear anybody else's, because I'm just very mindful of the fact that with latency and everything that Stephen discussed, that's not going to be possible. But it gave them the option to just sing with a gesture with everybody else, but there was no gratifying sense of everybody singing back at them. The only thing afterwards, I'm like, okay, great. How did that go for you? Because there's not going to be a delay in gesture and sound between me and them, because I'm not listening to them. All I'm doing is just conducting, and they're just watching me conduct, but it's probably coming at them 3 seconds late. But if they're on mute, it's the closest thing I think that I've been able to come up with to unify gesture, original sound, and singing at something. So I just want to make sure, because in case we have anybody who's calling in, like we talked about, because you can call into Zoom using a phone number, same thing with other platforms. So if someone can't see the results for the poll, are you hoping to emulate a performance model? Only 20, sorry if everyone can hear my dog growling, 24% performance model, 51% alternate approach with individual submissions, 52% alternate approach with strategic guided listening, 10% with the alternate approach of readings, and 34% of other. Now, granted, please don't think that any of that should add up to 100%. Lots of people had multiple options. I want to make sure to continue to answer some questions. Is anyone having to update/edit learning outcomes with all these new learning modules for choir?
I guess my response to that would be, I had to narrow it down to 3 to 5 learning outcomes. I could not possibly address all of the learning outcomes that were in my original syllabus.
I'll also answer, we were required to update our syllabi, and at some point it became almost daily as the university changed their requirements. But fortunately, they just asked us to include it in the syllabus what the plan was. So here's how often we're going to meet, and here's how that's going to look based on shifting to an online platform. But the learning outcomes did not need to be changed in our case, fortunately. But I think that's for ensembles. That's probably different for other types of courses.
Okay, another question that came up, because I guess we have some attendees who have choir as a 3-credit course. I asked for an expansion upon the question, and he said, my dean said that we can't simply declare our work complete. I think I can make a case for the students, but not sure he or she will accept that faculty are paid for the ensemble as if it were a 3-credit course. Any thoughts about that?
Well, that was one of the, Marie, that was one of the things further down on the list. Um, uh, I think in this time, one of the justifications for just calling it a wash or just saying we've met the required amount of hours, you're a 1-credit class, I think it's really given us an opportunity to examine how much work our classes do for that 1 credit. Many, I've never heard of I'm not too familiar with ensembles that are 3 credits. That's heavy. They are generally 1 or even sometimes a half a credit. But I just think that it's interesting to consider that the credit load in the context of making that decision, whether to call it a wash or to move on. Now, in that instance, with it being a 3-credit class, I would probably suspect that more would have to be done. But I do know that there's a study coming out. My dear friend, Dr. Stuart Chapman Hill at Webster University is doing a study right now looking at the ensemble requirements of all NASM schools. And he's doing that with a group of people at SMTE, the Society for Music Teacher Education. So I'm really excited to see what comes from that. That will be very telling. But Stephen, I'm curious to know your thoughts now.
Well, the faculty senator and me would recommend to the questioner to check your department's personnel documents, because if you can find explicit language, and I bet it's written down somewhere in your university, if there's explicit language that states very clearly what your load is supposed to be and how you are compensated for that load, then yes, you may or may not be required to follow those guidelines. But just because somebody says that you are being paid for 3 credits, even though you're only teaching 1 credit, there's a lot of universities where that's really not the case if you look at their personnel documents. And these are crazy times, and this is a great time where we all have maybe an extra few minutes a day to get really familiar with what the personnel documents say for your particular department, for your particular school or college, and for the university personnel documents as well. So you know what can, and more importantly, sometimes what cannot be expected of you as set forth by your university. I think we're all doing our best, but I know that there already have been a couple of cases in Arkansas where we've had to stick up for ourselves, where we have been asked to do things that were beyond the scope of what was put in the personnel documents as set forth by the particular school or college. And it's up to us to know what that says and use that as your guidance.
There was something interesting from Andrew Manier saying that he had done a Zoom with the students discussing the poetry. So I thought that was really great to call out, because we do have that asset of being able to discuss poetry that perhaps we might not be able to have the time to do in a rehearsal. And this allows for the pros of, this very maybe unpro situation. There's a question of what happens if this continues into the fall semester? What is the purpose of choirs in an online situation for a full semester? I'm assuming he was asking, I'm concerned about purpose and mission. Any thoughts?
I'll just jump in and maybe just add to the question a little bit, but I think this is an important moment for all of us to follow along the lines of Brandon and Stephen's comments. One of my colleagues said to me, well, it's fine that you guys aren't required to meet anymore, but the students are probably going to say, well, how come we normally have to do all this work for just 1 credit? And of course, my thought about the student side of that is, we don't really do it for the credit, and it's actually to our benefit, maybe in some ways, maybe not in others, but there's suddenly, this is all being called into question. What do we actually do? And I certainly hope we don't make ourselves seem, this is just my own personal feeling, but that we don't seem too eager to get rid of the physical presence. I hope this never ever becomes a replacement. And it's almost tempting for me to say to my dean, boy, this virtual choir thing, boy, I can't wait till we're together again. Just because I want to ensure that we keep advocating for the importance of what we do. But I think that it's a scary reality. I think finding ways to engage the students without negating the importance of what this really is. It's sound in real time. It's a group of people singing together, and there's no way around that. So I think as long as we kind of keep perspective on this being a solution to mend the gap, and just, if we go into the fall, then we'll probably have a whole lot more software and ideas by then to sort of deal with some of those issues. But anyway, just just thoughts about, you know, how we're going to deal with that.
And to jump on what Amanda just said, I totally agree, and I appreciate your comment on that. I think just the fact that we are having to address this issue now and how much we are struggling with it attests to the fact that there's no way to emulate that interaction that you have in a face-to-face rehearsal. You know, as choral directors, a lot of times we are so out there to solve things, we want to fix things, we want to make it work for our students, but the sheer fact is it will never replicate, and that's just fine.
The mission of ensembles is a little bit different at colleges and universities, mainly depending on the size of the music department. A lot of big universities out there like Arkansas that have hundreds of music majors, and all of those music majors must have ensemble as part of their degree requirements for degree advancement to get them to graduation. That's a different scenario than maybe a small liberal arts college that doesn't have music majors, where they can do something alternative. If we get the fall canceled, I have no idea what the heck we do, because what do I do for our 75 voice majors who must have an ensemble credit to advance for degrees? And maybe you don't worry about the freshmen or the sophomores because they'll have time to make it up, but especially the seniors next year, the music ed majors who are slated to student teach next spring, who need the fall credit to graduate. Now we have to get creative, and I don't have that answer yet, but I have a lot of time over the summer to think about it.
Yeah. Well, this situation has caught us in an interesting situation where I think music education education is behind. We are behind, and the technology is not there. The infrastructure is not in place for us to still be effective in situations, fully effective in situations like that. But again, I agree with Amanda that you can't replace that human piece, that interaction, that sense of togetherness and listening in sound and responding to gesture without delays. I mean, that can't be replicated, but I think we can get close, and we can at least look at this time as an opportunity to think about apps and programs and how we can move forward and kind of catch up, get education into the 21st century.
And just thank you, Brandon. And just looking at our time, we are up to that hour, and I'm sure we could probably discuss this more and more. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank our panel. Thank you so much for your wonderful thoughts and for your knowledge, and to everybody who's been contributing so much on the chat, to all the attendees. I'm just very encouraged by this robust conversation, because it's not like choral music just died when this all happened. We all fought to work really hard to maintain choral music for our students and for our community. So thank you to everyone. I just wanted to encourage everyone to join us on Friday for our second webinar, which is going to be Togetherness is Not a Course Objective.